In Hollywood, what happens when two of the most beautiful women are after the same parts, the same men, and the same spotlight? Joan Collins has been more open than ever about her long and difficult relationship with Elizabeth Taylor since she turned 92. Their story isn't just about fame. It's also about lying to you. There was anger and rivalry that started when someone stole a crown made for Cleopatra. Collins was going to wear it until the studio gave it to Taylor instead. This choice changed their lives forever. Then there was a complicated web of competition and connection, with missed chances, tense relationships, and a surprise turn of friendship at the end. Collins's story about Taylor is much more complicated than what the headlines said, and it still makes people wonder. Joan Collins had every reason to think that Cleopatra would be hers in the early 1960s. By the time she was signed by 20th Century Fox, she was already getting ready for one of the biggest movies in Hollywood history. Collins was very pretty and in her late 20s, with the charm that could keep people interested. At first, executives thought she would be a great choice for the famous Egyptian queen. People in the business thought her career was about to reach new heights when the contract was written and screen tests were talked about. Collins quickly found out, though, that in Hollywood, no part was ever really safe. Liz Taylor was watching from behind the scenes. Taylor was already one of the most well-known people in the world at that point. She was a star whose every move made the news. She won 2 Academy Awards and was a common name. After she told them she wanted Cleopatra, the studio's plans changed right away. Fox officials were amazed at how well Taylor would do at the box office and offered her a salary of $1 million, which was the most money ever paid to an actress at the time. It was a terrible blow to Collins, who was on the verge of making history. The choice to get rid of her wasn't just a business one. It hurt like hell. Not only did Cleopatra become famous for its flashy sets and increasing costs, but Taylor and Burton's scandalous relationship began while the movie was being filmed. Their affair made headlines all over the world and made Taylor a culture icon beyond the movie world. Meanwhile, Collins was left to watch as the part that could have changed her future was given to someone else. Became the most important part of Taylor's legend. Years later, she thought about how that event changed how she saw Taylor. She said it felt like she was losing ground in a race she had been running since the beginning of her career, not just a part. Collins had been told that she was bound for love, power, and influence in a field dominated by men, and Taylor seemed to have all of those things. Everyone thought Taylor was a goddess, on and off film. It looked like Collins was always one step ahead of her, but Cleopatra was just the start. Not long after that, Collins started dating the same man who had made Taylor's life hard before. There, things got darker, more shocking, and much more personal than any lost movie part. If losing Cleopatra made her feel like she had been betrayed by her job, her next meeting with Elizabeth Taylor's shadow hurt even more. Because this time it wasn't about acting jobs or studio politics. It was about a man. Not just any man, but Conrad Nicky Hilton Jr., who is the heir to the Hilton hotel wealth and was married to Elizabeth Taylor for the first time. Taylor married Nicky when she was only 18 years old, in 1950. The world saw a beautiful young pair getting married, an American princess and a Hollywood princess. Behind closed doors, Taylor went through a whole different thing. He drank a lot, gambled a lot, and lost his anger easily, which made their marriage bad. Taylor had scars from it for years, even though it only lasted 8 months. Joan Collins would see those scars for herself many years later. Soon after Collins broke up with Taylor, he started dating Hilton. At first, it was a quick hookup, but it quickly turned into something much more unstable. In her book, she wrote about scary events that showed the less appealing side of his personality. Hilton is said to have taken out a gun one night after a fight and shot herself in the ceiling while she was in bed. It was the kind of shocking event that broke Collins's sense of safety and showed him how unstable he could be. People still saw Hilton as the handsome playboy prince. He was a man who brought chaos into relationships, no matter how rich or important he was to Taylor and Collins. Collins couldn't help but see the similarities. She wasn't just going up against Taylor on TV. She was going through the same stormy nightmare that Taylor had been through. There was already a competition going on, but this made it much more personal. Later, they said that being linked to the same man felt like a terrible turn of events. Although Taylor was able to get away from Hilton fast, Collins stayed with him longer, hoping that Hilton would calm down and keep his word. It turned out that she was stuck in a cycle of drama that put both her emotional health and her job at risk. For people who had only seen them on the red carpet, these two women, who were the most beautiful stars of their age, being tied together by such a bad man was almost unthinkable. Still, it was true. When Collins moved away from Hilton, she couldn't help but feel like Taylor's shadow was always with her. But things never go smoothly in Hollywood. People who are enemies can find things they have in common, and even the worst comparisons can lead to surprising friendship. For sure, that's what would happen when Collins and Taylor ran into each other again years later. Not as enemies this time, but as co-stars. For many years, people talked about both Joan Collins and Elizabeth Taylor at the same time. Two beautiful brunettes, both born in London, are both vying for the same parts and carrying the weight of their glitzy reputations. Glamour writers couldn't get enough of the feud story, which made them seem like perfect opposites. Taylor was cast as Hollywood royalty, a beautiful woman with violet eyes who could make whole companies do what she wanted, while Collins was cast as the fresh new face. Beautiful, but always one step behind. It looked like the strain between them would never go away for a long time, frozen in newspaper ink. But Hollywood changes the stories it tells. By the late 1990s, both women had been through decades of crazy fame, scandalous news stories, and hard personal battles. Taylor had been through several divorces, was constantly criticized for her weight, and had major health problems that sent her to the hospital more than once. Collins did a great job of changing herself in the 1980s, when she played Alexis Carrington on Dynasty and stole the show. That she was much more than a Cleopatra-like figure. Both women were now legendary, and people praised them for being strong as well as beautiful. With age came wisdom, and the sharp edges of competition slowly gave way to an understanding of how much they shared. 2001 was when things really changed, when they agreed to be in the TV comedy These Old Broads Together. On paper, it looked like a fun movie about old actors dealing with the chaos of Hollywood. In fact, it was a carefully planned get-together of women who had defined an era in the past. Some of them are Debbie Reynolds, Shirley MacLaine, Collins, and Taylor. It was more than just another part for Collins and Taylor. It was an important time. After decades of quiet hatred, a public ceasefire. There was no way to miss the project's irony. Studio executives and gossip writers used to put two women against each other, but now they were on the same movie and laughing at the very people who put them against each other. On set, she said that Taylor had shocked her. Under the gems and the air of untouchable glitz, Taylor was funny, self-deprecating, and even open. She wasn't the cold faux Collins had thought she would be for so many years. Instead, she was a survivor who had been hurt, laughed at, and stared at all the time, but still kept her warmth. During their time on These Old Broads, they became real friends. Collins said nice things about Taylor afterward, praising her kindness, humor, and amazing ability to stay gracious even though she had been in the public eye since she was a kid. Collins may have been a warning to Taylor that they were not so different after all, since she had been sick and felt alone as a celebrity. Both women had been looked at by the public, both had been hurt by love, and both had had to fight to stay in a business that usually gets rid of women when they get old. The movie wasn't a huge hit, but what it meant to culture made it more important than its numbers. People weren't just watching a comedy. They were seeing two people get along again. After decades of being seen as rivals, Collins and Taylor found something they had in common. They both wanted to tell people that tabloid stories aren't always true. These two people were not competing this time. They were friends and laughed together on screen, taking back the story that the media had told about them years before. Even though they were friends, Collins wasn't going to let Hollywood off the hook. In the years that followed, she started to reveal the darker sides of the system that had almost killed both her and Taylor in interviews and the books she wrote. She was ready to show how dangerous the path to fame had really been. During most of her career, Joan Collins was presented as a beautiful woman who had it all: fame, money, and style. Her face was on the front of magazines. Her name was linked to strong men, and her jobs made it look like she was always successful. But a darker picture came to light when she talked about herself more honestly in interviews and in her telling documentary, This is Joan Collins. Behind the glamour of Hollywood's golden age was an industry full of dishonest company bosses, manipulation, and constant pressure to fit in. Collins also said that she and Elizabeth Taylor were two women who lived through the worst of it and told the story. Collins said that when she was just starting out, studio leaders tried to get her to work with them. She remembered how these guys, who had the power to choose who would be cast, expected everyone to follow their rules in order to get a job. It cost her something to not take part in what was then called the casting couch culture. People called her tough. Some roles that seemed possible at one point disappeared all of a sudden. Contracts were put on hold for no reason. There were no more auditions. Someone very important to her even told her directly, "If you don't play the game, you won't get the part." Said no. However, in a system that rewarded silence and submission. Because she said no, she became a target. Elizabeth Taylor, on the other hand, seemed safe because of her fame, but the studio system still had a lot of power over her. Before she turned 20, she had already shown that she was one of the world's most bankable stars. Still, the producers watched her every move, told her who she could hang out with, and planned publicity stunts to make her look better. Taylor didn't live her own life. It was a well-planned show, with her private decisions being looked at closely and put together for everyone to see. When her real-life scandals came to light, like her infamous affair with Richard Burton during Cleopatra, the business that used to worship her turned against her. The newspapers that used to call her America's sweetheart now call her a homewrecker. But Taylor didn't let the anger get to her. She put her weight on it. The companies tried to punish her, so she raised her price, asking for amounts that shocked the executives and set new standards for female stars. When tabloids tried to make fun of her, she made bigger news by showing off the diamonds Burton gave her, going to public events on her own terms, and not saying sorry for the choices she made. The system that tried to bring her down became her tool for power after she turned scandal into it. Collins often talked about how much she admired Taylor's strength during those times. Even though they used to be enemies, she couldn't ignore how tough Taylor had to be to handle all the attention. Collins knew she had the same kind of strength. She wouldn't bend over to the casting couch. She had lived through being written off. She had been compared to Elizabeth Taylor for decades, making her feel like she was less important. And yet, she had risen again with power, showing that she could change when Hollywood thought she was done. But getting through it left scars. Collins later said that her refusal to give in may have cost her parts like Cleopatra and others that made her career. That Taylor was always ready to fight, no matter what, got her into a lot of trouble, she admitted, in a way that made her a symbol of freedom. They showed the holes in the Hollywood machine together long before the business was ready to face its own wrongdoings. Collins and Taylor became close without saying a word because they had been through the same thing. They were no longer just enemies. Many people outside of their group had never seen them fight in a war. Women who had fought fights behind closed doors that were just as dramatic as the ones they played on TV or in movies. Collins made it clear that the truth about old Hollywood was much more cruel than the shiny photos ever showed when she wrote her stories. Collins was honest in more than just her video, though. In her later autobiographies, she opened the door even more, telling new stories about Taylor, their feud, and the dangerous, glamorous world they lived in together. And those new facts added another shocking turn to their story. For many years, Joan Collins hid a lot of her rivalry with Elizabeth Taylor behind a layer of glitz. She smiled for the cameras, came up with funny sound bites, and rarely let her flaws show. But as she got older, she told the truth a lot more. Behind the shoulder pads, Tales I Only Tell My Friends, her most recent memoir, shows a woman who is no longer interested in keeping Hollywood's stories alive. Instead, she tells the stories the way she remembers them, even if it hurts. Collins agrees with Taylor that he always seemed to be ahead, both on and off the screen. She wrote about her heartbreak over losing the part of Cleopatra, which made it clear that it followed her around for a long time. She also told him straight out that she thought Taylor stole not only the part, but also the guys around her. Collins gave the name of Nicky Hilton as an example, but she also hinted at other women who were attractive and said that Taylor's beauty could draw attention to her whether she wanted it to or not. Collins didn't make this sound like hate. Instead, she made it seem like a constant source of anger, of being forever compared to someone whose fame was overwhelming. In her diaries, she also talks about how Hollywood loved to put women against each other. Thought about the way tabloids in the 1950s and 1960s loved to make contests. Reporters loved comparing Collins and Taylor's looks and would write over and over that one was the British beauty and the other was the Hollywood queen. The press said the women were fighting even when they weren't. Collins said that she contributed to the story by making mean comments about Taylor at times, but she now saw that they were both subjects of the same story. Still, Collins couldn't help but write things that tabloids would have killed for back then. She talked about her rough time with Hilton and made awkward comparisons to Taylor's marriage. She let people see behind the scenes at Hollywood parties where Taylor was the life of the party. She wrote about Taylor's jewelry, clothes, and lavish lifestyle, which made her a sign of excess. Collins, on the other hand, often felt like she was vying for the same attention. With her usual dry sense of humor, she wrote these stories that showed how personal the feud had been to her. But what's so interesting about Collins's autobiography? It's not just the rumors, it's the truth. She said she was jealous and that she felt bad about what she did. She admitted that anger had sometimes made it hard for her to see things clearly. She did this by painting a more realistic and complex picture of Elizabeth Taylor than the one-dimensional goddess Hollywood had made her into. In Collins's eyes, Taylor was more than just a foe. She was smart, interesting, and flawed. She made mistakes, took risks, and lived her life her own way. By writing these thoughts down, Collins gave fans something they had never really seen before. The private thoughts of a woman who had lived in Taylor's shade but had also found her own light in the end. As she looked back, she made it clear that their story wasn't just about being rivals. It was about surviving, being strong, and the complicated respect that comes from being in the sun your whole life. Collins did think about things beyond himself, though. In the end, she wanted people to understand the deeper meaning of her rivalry with Taylor, a truth about power, jealousy, and forgiveness that went beyond Hollywood. The story of Joan Collins and Elizabeth Taylor reads like its own Hollywood epic now that we look back on it. It had everything: amazing highs, painful lows, complicated relationships, and shocking endings. The first part was Cleopatra, which Collins thought would make her famous. Seeing Taylor step into it and make it into one of the most famous movie roles ever. The competition got worse when both women were tied to Nicky Hilton, a bad guy whose good looks hid a violent temper that left scars that would never go away. The press enjoyed making them seem like they were at odds with each other for decades, making it seem like only one could be Hollywood's queen. Even the sharpest tips become less sharp over time. Collins and Taylor were no longer young women trying to get parts or making headlines when they wore these old broads together. They had been through a lot in a business that took everything and gave very little back. They had both been loved, lied to, used, and praised in equal amounts. And through that shared experience, Collins learned something he didn't expect. There was more to Taylor than just the woman who stole Cleopatra. She was someone who had been through a lot of hard times. They were both strong, and that helped them get over decades of anger. In her autobiography, she said things she had never said out loud when they were at their most competitive. Taylor made her jealous. She thought her fame made her look foolish. She admired her wit, kindness, and ability to keep going even though she was constantly being watched without giving up. Collins never thought that Elizabeth Taylor was the mythical goddess she seemed to be, covered in diamonds and impossible to touch. It told the truth about a woman who, like Collins, fought back against a business that tried to break her. Their story shows that competition doesn't always lead to hate. It can turn into respect sometimes. In some cases, seeing your own insecurities in someone else pushes you to face them. And sometimes it turns into an understanding that you can only get older. Collins no longer hides behind Hollywood lies at age 92. She says that she is jealous, hurt, and impressed all at the same time. She takes away the myths to show that she is a real person behind the glamour. The story of Collins and Taylor isn't really about who won or lost in the end. It's more about how both women make it through. People may forget about scandals and fame, but the human facts of jealousy, survival, and forgiveness in the end will always be there. The most shocking twist of all is in that truth. Their competition was never just about men, Cleopatra, or the news. It was about two women who made history against all chances and learned to respect each other for it in their own ways. I found Joan Collins' story about Elizabeth Taylor's hidden truth just as interesting as I did. Please click the like button and follow for more stories that reveal the truth about Hollywood's biggest stars. Also, let me know in the comments if you think their competition made them who they were, or if you think it was their strength that made them unforgettable.